Professor Muni. Um, this morning, I will be speaking to you on the security aspects of India-Pakistan relations, with particular focus on the border security issues, because that's the mandate that has been given for this training capsule. Here, I will be dealing with 5 aspects: the strategic outlook of the elite in Pakistan, the threats to India's border security, the challenges faced in managing the borders by the 3 Indian states and 1 union territory bordering Pakistan, the steps taken by the government to mitigate security problems along the international border and the LOC, and some issues that still need to be tackled. The strategic outlook of the political, bureaucratic, and military elite in Pakistan was shaped by historical exigencies, the geopolitical location, Pakistan's self-perception, and its Islamic credentials. In the initial years, the Pakistani leadership perceived the country to be weak against India and held the belief that India posed an existential threat to it. Later, the Pakistani leadership was committed to avenging the Pakistani defeat in the 1971 war. The use of non-state actors for attacks on symbols of Indian sovereignty and a series of attacks on metropolitan cities in India has enabled Pakistan to adopt a policy of denial. It has taken several hostile steps against India under the nuclear umbrella, but this sense of achievement has been more than offset by the fact that none of its strategies has enabled it to weaken India or to snatch Kashmir from it. For quite some time, Kashmir was considered to be the main cause of India-Pakistan conflict, and it was believed that a dialogue with Pakistan, even if held intermittently, would pave the way for resolving the conflict with Pakistan. But of late, it has become obvious that even if the Kashmir issue was resolved, Pakistan's hostility towards India is not going to end. In the post-Pulwama, post-Balakot scenario, Pakistan is unlikely to dispense with its strategy of using non-state actors to attack India, even if there is growing pressure on it from the international community to stop sponsoring terror. Pakistan is mindful of the economic implications of flouting FATF demands, but its commitment to using terror as an instrument of policy against India is so strong that it seems willing to compromise FATF demands. The recent indictment of LET and its chief Hafiz Saeed should not be interpreted as a sign of Pakistan's willingness to dismantle the terror infrastructure. Post the abrogation of Article 370 by the Indian government, the verdict on Ayodhya, and the passing of the Citizenship Amendment Act, besides the overt discomfiture of the Pakistan government, the opinion flowing from the English as well as the vernacular media reflects the thinking of the Pakistani establishment and the religious right. According to them, India has invited jihad by closing the doors of negotiation, and Pakistan should avoid reaching out to India. Only jihad can settle the scores with India. Given the above perspective on Pakistan's strategic thinking vis-à-vis India, the question arises, how well is India prepared to meet the security threats from Pakistan? The fact that the attacks like Pathankot, Uri, and Pulwama took place raises questions about India's preparedness with regard to counterterrorism. It casts a reflection on the effectiveness of India's counterterrorism apparatus, the limitations of Indian intelligence, and the weaknesses of India's internal security forces. Therefore, I think we need to have a closer look at the steps undertaken by the government of India to improve our counterterrorism efforts in the larger perspective of the border security situation along the India-Pakistan border. To an audience like this, who's very well informed on the basic issues pertaining to border security, I don't think there's so much new that I can tell you, but I will try to highlight the problems that exist in the different sectors of the India-Pakistan border and how the different agencies of the government of India have been trying to respond to those problems to safeguard India's security. We know that India's security has been continually compromised by the infiltration of militants from across the border, both from the international border as well as the LOC, the cross-border firing, and the trafficking of drugs and arms. After the brief lull in militancy, the number of incidents of terrorist violence in J&K has gone up gradually over the last 5 years. The reported infiltration attempts in J&K and the net estimated infiltration has also gone up. While the intensity of cross-border firing did reduce after the ceasefire agreement of November 2003, it did not stop completely, and the last 2-3 years have been witness to heightened ceasefire violations. India's proximity to the major opium-producing regions of Southwest and Southeast Asia has made it vulnerable to the transit, trade, and consumption of opium derivatives. Trafficking in heroin takes place through the India-Pakistan border. In 2017, as per the figures given by the Narcotics Control Bureau, the maximum amount of heroin was seized in Gujarat, followed by Punjab, and then J&K. The increased vigil along the IB has made Gujarat's vast coastline a favored spot for Pakistan-based drug cartels to traffic drugs to Europe, Canada, and the US. Pakistan's attempts to destabilize the Indian economy by smuggling fake Indian currency notes is not new, but traditional routes along the India-Pakistan border have given way to smuggling through the India-Nepal and India-Bangladesh border. 3 years after demonetization, we see that Pakistan is producing, smuggling, and circulating better quality FICNs to finance illicit activities and militant groups, including the LAT and the JEM. India's long border with Pakistan stretches over 3,323 kilometers and covers 3 states and 1 union territory with different topography and climate, which in itself makes the management of borders a challenging task. Along the international border, in Gujarat, the border runs through marshy land, which is difficult enough to navigate in the dry seasons and even more so during the rains. Fences cannot be constructed along marshy stretches. The innumerable creeks also facilitate infiltration and smuggling, as these areas cannot be fenced, one of the most daring examples of which is the Harami Nala, which has been witness to several attempts of infiltration. In Rajasthan, the border is across the Thar Desert with its high sand dunes which keep shifting, making fencing a difficult proposition. While sandstorms restrict visibility, the extreme temperatures make it difficult for the border forces to function optimally. While the terrain in Punjab and Jammu is flat, which makes the movement along the border relatively easier, the 2 major rivers, the Satluj and the Ravi, along with numerous small streams, are vulnerable to infiltration and smuggling due to the inability to fence those areas. The growth of tall elephant grass along the IB obstructs visibility of the border personnel. Now, very briefly, we see that the Modi government has given a lot of emphasis to the construction of border outposts of the BSF, which have been integral to providing security along the IB, and it has fast-tracked the fencing and floodlighting in the border areas. The implementation of a comprehensive integrated border management system, which is supposed to integrate the use of high-tech surveillance devices. It is supposed to provide a dedicated communication network for transmitting the data gathered and a command and control center to which the data would be sent so that a threat could be classified and assistance provided to the field commander acquired urgency in the aftermath of the Pathankot terrorist attack. It was expected to address existing gaps in the system of border security. It was envisaged that the BSF personnel would be organized into quick reaction teams to enhance their detection and interception capabilities. 2 pilot projects have been completed in Jammu, and projects are to be completed in Gujarat and Punjab in the next phase. Okay. We see that the government, I will just take another minute or so, the government has shown keenness to implement the suggestions. The government has shown keenness to implement the suggestions given by the Madhukar Gupta committee, which was set up after the Pathankot attack to identify gaps in border security. And the committee gave its recommendations on a number of aspects: threats in border protection, assessment of force level, deployment along the border, and infrastructure and technology issues for protection of borders and administrative issues. A dozen laser walls have already been made operational along the IB in Punjab last year to plug the riverine terrain. I will not go into the details, but the Philip Campos Committee, which was also set up after the Pathankot attack, recommended the setting up of technology-based security infrastructure and the positioning of well-trained, armed, and equipped quick reaction teams at high threat and high priority military bases. So, in conclusion, I will say that while the government has moved forward on a lot of recommendations, but still, there are still issues that need to be tackled. And very briefly, the 5 issues that came up during my discussions and reading with people were that the state administrations have been facing difficulties in acquiring land, which has led to a delay in the construction of border roads, fencing, and the floodlighting process. There's also been a delay in the construction of border outposts along the India-Pakistan border so as to achieve the target of 3.5 kilometer of inter-BOP distance. And despite the high amount of drug seizures along the border in Punjab and J&K, the flow of drugs from across the border and that the intelligence inputs have been too generic in nature. And finally, the projects under the Border Area Development Program have also not been seen to be implemented effectively. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.